So former JCC President Afra Raymond is going to join me momentarily, but before we get into that discussion, we must remind you that today's emergency parliamentary session might be a formality as the government is not requiring a special majority to pass amendments to the Procurement Act. Now, this comes as the opposition has already said that it will not support it. We saw that. The opposition leader teared the paper in the meeting on Monday. Now, Dr. Rowley made the announcement yesterday during an interview on a radio program as he faced criticism from an attorney who accused the People's National Movement of butchering the legislation. Here's more in this report.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley says the government will not be seeking a special majority in its pursuit to amend the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act 2015 at Wednesday's emergency parliamentary sitting. Speaking on I-95.5 FM on Tuesday, Dr. Rowley says it's more than just emergencies that the amendments will address.
It will facilitate what is called exigencies. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. As I'm speaking to you now, something could happen in a hospital that has consequences that require the government to act and to act. There's provision for emergency, but it doesn't cover every situation.
The Prime Minister adds that the government has been facing inflated prices from companies registered under the existing legislation.
We have 100,000 people who provide government with service about one kind or another. I'm told only about 8,000 have registered. So it means that you're now confined in a way that wasn't the intention. Yeah. And once that happens, if you discover that you are the only person supplying the government, what does that do for price?
Price going up.
So you would have put yourself outside of the benefit of competition.
But former Senate President Timothy Hamel-Smith has accused the government of flouting the procurement legislation, as he demanded that they reveal how much was spent following 2 exemption orders for judicial matters and to host the CARICOM summit 2 weeks ago. In a statement on Tuesday, Hamel-Smith says that for good governance to prevail, a comprehensive list of the expenditure unlawfully incurred and the suppliers to whom payment was intended must be revealed. Hamel-Smith adds that if the government fails to make such disclosure, not only does it demonstrate that it holds the public in contempt, but this leads to the conclusion that what they are seeking to do is to cover up the very corruption that procurement law was intended to eradicate. Meanwhile, at the United National Congress Monday night report last night, opposition leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar announced that her party will not support the amendments. She tore up the legislation, saying the proposed amendments will be the final nail in the coffin of procurement legislation. Persad-Bissessar added that bringing the amendments with a negative resolution gives the minister free rein.
You're removing the affirmative resolution, which means it had to come to Parliament. You had to come and explain it before you could exempt it. He's changing that to negative resolution, which means he just writes up the order. It takes effect immediately. If not challenged in Parliament within 40 days, it continues. So he's been given a blank check.
Wednesday's extraordinary sitting begins at 1:30 p.m. Doris Polo, CNC3 News.
Well, let me bring Afra Raymond into the discussion immediately. And I want to ask Mr. Raymond, as per usual, let me firstly say good morning. Great to see you. Thanks for the time.
Morning.
You know, this is perplexing my tranquility, Afra. You know, it's just, this has been running around. It's like it's just we're going to lapse around everybody's mind for so long now. Where are we and what do you anticipate from today's special and extraordinary meeting in Parliament? Is today even going to make a difference per se, or is it just all part of the theatre, just another formality, as it were?
Well, today's a day of special significance. It's not just part of the theatre or a mere formality. What is the significance of today is that today is the day the Parliament has been reconvened to rectify the errors and omissions that were pointed out in the public procurement amendments from 2020. And the first thing to understand is that those amendments of 2020 intended that the ministerial exemption, the power of the minister to create an exempt category of activities or an exempt service or event or something, were agreed in Parliament in December 2020 to be subject to an affirmative resolution, meaning the minister had to table the intended exemption in Parliament for the public, the media, and the parliamentarians to be made aware of it. Debate it, explain himself and debate it, and put it to vote in both houses. So there was a level of transparency in terms of intended exemptions happening under the minister's hand. What has happened is that those intentions were never recognized. The law was badly written up. And in fact, the law did not contain those provisions that the Parliament had agreed. And a few days after, the Minister of Finance understood. He said it in Hansard, page 43 of the Hansard, 11th of December 2020. He said that he understood that, in fact, there had been an omission and it needed to be fixed. It was never fixed. And that omission, that loophole, was used by the very said Minister of Finance to create two exemptions, one on the 29th of May for the judiciary and one on the 29th of June for CARICOM. And the subsequent diplomatic events, both of them are for 3 months.
Yeah, and I guess that's where
now that there's been this heavy criticism, we have this Parliament has been reconvened to deal with this. And here's where we get to the fascinating part of the story. Because one would think, from the statements of the Prime Minister and the statements of the Minister of Finance, one would think that they were going to recognize and adopt the position that had been agreed in Parliament in December 2020. In other words, affirmative resolution for ministerial exemptions. What we have is that the paper that's been tabled for discussion in Parliament is for negative resolution, which is a far lower level of transparency and quite frankly, a huge step backward. So we have the Minister of Finance knowing that there was this loophole and using it instead of rectifying it like he promised the Parliament. And now we have the leader of government business laying in Parliament an order to rectify the act, but that rectification is not taking place in accordance with what Parliament agreed at the relevant time. I have another point to make, but let me pause here so you could go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, well, I mean, we go back to that loophole, and we wonder if that loophole was done by design, because at the end of the day, we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday. Now he went into a place where I guess everyone could understand if there is an emergency. He spoke about, if there's a situation at a hospital. He said that yesterday on the radio program.
Yes,
I would imagine there are special provisions where you could more or less, get the ball rolling, and the bureaucracy and the red tape to get stuff done, that is out the window, because we need to work with it. But let's say, the CARICOM meeting of that significance, that kind of emergency, and the other scenario that you explained. I mean, it's again, the whole concept of transparency. That is what the Procurement Act is all about, to ensure that everything is above board. And it's almost ironic that the same thing that it was built and structured and engineered to do is kind of being undermined, as it were, based on some of the happenings recently.
Yes, well, I mean, you're making a very valuable point, Jason, when you started speaking about the whole question about the emergency type scenario.
Yeah,
the emergency scenario is being used by the politicians, Dr. Rowley and Minister Imbut. It's being used by the politicians to create a sense of fear. What if something in the hospital, and what if something with WASA, with the water, and all of these things and so on? And as if the procurement law is one size fits all, any procurement will take 2 months, and in fact, people will die in the hospital and people will have no water. And those statements that they are making are totally false. The procurement law actually has emergency provisions. They are proper emergency provisions. That is total falsehood. I will not be silent on it. That is totally false. It is without foundation. They have proper emergency provisions in the law. Stop it. The public expects you to behave in accordance with your oath of office and discharge your duty to the fullest of your abilities. Stop it.
Today's meeting, extraordinary and special meeting, based on the amendments, and I guess the opposition says, well, we saw it via the theater. And again, I go back to that word, we saw it via the political meeting on Monday with the ripping of the paper and the literal verbal confirmation that there is going to be no support. where do we go from here, obviously, after they meet today, after they make the amendments? Do you believe that, they will be able to now finally dot the I's and cross all the T's?
Well, there are two stages to the thing, Jason. Firstly, at a very literal, mechanical level, the Parliament has a majority of PNM members, which is why they're in government. And if the thing is put to a vote, they would simply be able to prevail in the lower house and in the upper house. So that is out of the way, okay? Having said that, there's another thing taking place where, in fact, Ravi Balgobin Maranj had actually written a pre-action protocol to the Attorney General's office on the question of the legality of those two exemptions. And he was making the same point I am making now about the exemptions being passed in an illegal fashion because, in fact, the law does not reflect what was agreed in the Parliament and so on and so on. And there's a letter that the AG's office, the head of legal there, wrote a letter to Balgobin's lawyers. I read it last night. And that letter actually says, listen, we don't need to go ahead with this lawsuit. It's okay. Parliament has been reconvened to put this thing back in order, and therefore we can forget this whole lawsuit. And what is contradictory there is that although the chief of law for the AG's office is giving these assurances in writing on the AG's letterhead, what has been put in Parliament is, in fact, to amend the law with a negative resolution, which is contrary to what was agreed in December 2020, and is contrary to the legal assurances being given to Mr. Ravi Balgobin Maranj. So it is not a straightforward picture at all. And I think the government side should withdraw, remeasure their bearings. I think they should come to the Parliament and put in the Parliament what they agreed, which was in December 2020, an affirmative resolution. Because after all, if you're not up to anything, what have you got to hide? Yeah. Put an affirmative resolution and let's go ahead in good order. Let us approach this issue correct.
Afra, we've been talking about this procurement and wanting to straighten things out for many years.
Yes.
Wastage has been a major stumbling block to our development. Sure. And, over the years, we could stay here all morning and talk about the missteps. So procurement was really going to be a move in a direction that is progressive to take us away from that kind of wastage and the nepotism and the under-the-table scenarios that we encountered for decades.
Yes.
We find ourselves now in a ticklish spot, but I trust and I hope that the powers that be will work things out. And in that regard, I want to give you a chance to put in a closing remark and probably leave us with a positive nugget. If you believe sincerely that, one, they're going to work this out, put things in a gear, measure it up, so that we can continue to move forward as a nation, as a Twin Island state with less wastage, and we could finally straighten things out as it pertains to all these contracts and procurement.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. I think the first thing to say is that what we're witnessing are convulsions of the body politic. The body politic, as a operationalizing of the procurement law happens, the body politic is being relieved of some of its oversight of unsupervised powers. Because for 61 years, the body politic, meaning the political leaders of whatever dispensation, have been able to do as they please. Give this one a contract, don't give that one a contract, pay this one on time, pay that one late, and so on and so on. And for the first time, there's a body that is going to superintend all of that. It is an independent body. And the fear of that, the fear of sunlight, or in another scenario, the fear of someone turning on the light, is what has all of them behaving like this, convulsions. So people who've had the law on their desk for 8.5 years are saying that we didn't realize this or we didn't realize that. And it's kind of pathetic. It's kind of pathetic. The good side, I would say, for us to look forward to is that if in fact we are passing a law that is serious and it's a legacy policy and it's for the next 20 to 50 years of our country's development and our country's sustainability and our country's stability, We need to be mindful of issues beyond the party political issues, because those powers that PNM is contemplating placing in the hands of the Minister of Finance, those powers would act, and you're comfortable with it now, those powers would actually be looking quite different if another party was in power.
Yeah.
Therefore, proper oversight is required, so we have a measure of stability and accountability in the system that is for the benefit of the entire society.
Afra Raymond, as always, great seeing you. Thanks for the perspective this morning. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Afra Raymond, the former JCC president, touching base with us concerning today's extraordinary meeting at, well, it's going to happen today, right next door at the Parliament, and I'm sure coming out of the meeting, we will be talking about this probably even tomorrow. So stand by. We take a pause and we come back. We head across to UWI. The enrollment is on, and we touch base with Dr. Yao Ramisa, coordinator of the film degree program. UWI enrollment, it's on. Details after the break.